Today we're going to talk about a very exciting project in Memphis, Tennessee, the Central Station Memphis Hotel Reconstruction, winner of a Bronze Award in our 37th annual BD+C Reconstruction Awards. And with me today are McLean Wilson, the developer, Danny Bounds from Bounds and Gillespie, architect, executive architect for the project, Jonathan Smith from LRK, or if you prefer, Looney Rick's Kiss, who was with the design architectural team, and David Green from Robbins and Morton, who headed the construction for Robbins and Morton. So it's a great team. We're going to talk about a truly wonderful project called Central Station Memphis. And McLean, you know something about hotels because your grandfather was the founder of Holiday Inn, so a little bit of heritage there. Why did you want to do this particular project at the main train station in Memphis?
Yeah, so I got asked by Henry Turley, who is probably the most seasoned developer in Memphis for the last 30 years, to partner with him on this hotel. And it was important for me because it was my hometown. It was downtown, and adaptive reuse is such an important piece of creating culture, and you know, the building had a soul, and it had a soul that began when it was first constructed, and being able to be a part of the participation of the continuation of that soul was exciting. And so, you know, having the legacy of my grandfather and knowing that this may be the only hotel that I do in downtown, perhaps, I wanted it to be special, and I wanted it to represent Memphis. And so on the onset, we took really three questions that we wanted to have answered in the design process. One is, when you're in the Central Station Hotel, there's no doubt you're in Memphis. Okay. And two, when you're in the Central Station Hotel, there's no doubt that you're in the South Main Arts District. And thirdly, when you're in the Central Station Hotel, you're no doubt at the Central Station Hotel. So it just got to, you know, how are we going to create this distinct nature and what we're developing? And the answer to the first question really was, you know, Memphis is known for barbecue and music. And so really gravitating toward the music component of things, we decided to recreate the old concourse waiting room of the train station into a bar. And not just any bar, but a bar that would have a curated vinyl record library. And all of the records would be records that have some connectivity to Memphis.
All right, let's come back. Let's come back to that a little bit later,
okay.
McLean. You know, so Memphis, South Main Arts District, and music and art. Those were the three components. But
right.
I understand from you know, from the entry that the two firms sent in, that, you know, there was a question about constructability, and there was this weird way that the Central Station, dating back to what, 1914, right, was constructed. David, what was this tile thing that was going on with Central Station structural base?
Yeah, Robert. So very interesting structure built in the, as you mentioned, the 1914s by horse and buggy. And I remember walking around with the team, Danny and McLean and the structural engineer, and we're all scratching our head and trying to figure out what the structure was. And then about 10 minutes into it, looking into mechanical rooms and trying to look behind walls, we look on the ballroom wall, and there's a huge picture of the train station being built literally by horse and buggy, and it showed a column grid of steel and joist on 5-foot centers that had terracotta that was used as formwork back then. So they had terracotta, and then they poured concrete on top of it. So very unique, not a building technique used today by any means. But the trick there was, when we were cutting in the elevator shafts, 8 stories, the terracotta would fail. So it was a membrane design stress, like a seashell, which seashells are very strong because
or like an arch,
it's an arch
for a bridge or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. When you go through underneath the waterway, it's an arch,
Okay.
which is the strongest structure known to man. So all that being said, if you compromise one side of the arch, the entire structure comes down. That's the downfall of it. So
That would not be a
had
good
to be
thing.
very careful.
That would not be a good thing to have happen. I mean, there was a question whether you could go ahead with this project as a reconstruction. I mean, this structural thing. I mean, there were other things. There was only one elevator, I gather. There was low ceilings. There were floor height differentials. We get that with a lot of projects, but this tile thing is really interesting. So you were able to deal with that and get the structure stable and strong.
Very carefully. It gave us a lot of sleepless nights because it was new thing for a lot of the team members. Just
Right.
dealing with that and going up 8 stories, and some of the columns did not line up. And for example, the first and second floor had column lines that were offset 2 to 3 feet from the upper floors. So
Right.
it presented a very unique challenge.
Yeah. Well, Danny and Jonathan, there had been some changes made over the course of years that were kind of what we call, misdirected improvements, particularly and there was a ballroom acoustics problem. You got this grand area that just was going to be terrible for what you wanted to use it for. Could you talk about, Danny? Why don't you start off with that, and Jonathan, you can jump in.
Well, as you said, that ballroom is a primary piece of the project.
Mm-hmm.
It's a large ballroom, about 6,000 square feet, and it was known to have acoustic issues. And so one of the first challenges we had was to figure out, how do you address this acoustics problem?
Well, you got marble. You got a lot of marble in there, and everything's bouncing off. I think somebody said you could barely hear. I think it was you, Danny. It said you can barely hear a conversation with somebody just across from you. Yeah. So
everything in that space was a hard surface. You had an existing terrazzo floor. You had marble columns. You had plaster ceilings and walls, and the place was cavernous. Yeah. And so anytime you had to have a conversation, you could almost hear the person across the room talking.
This was not going to work well, Jonathan.
Right.
How did you and Danny and the acoustics team address this? What kinds of remediations did you make?
Yeah, and there's always kind of a struggle between the historic preservation side and the acoustic side, just to kind of parlay into that a little bit. There were several acoustic treatments that we looked at. I think ultimately the ones that proved successful was kind of, softening up the ground plane and also the ceiling plane with some acoustical plaster on the ceiling. Mm-hmm. But I think
you had to negotiate that with the Park Service, which is always involved in a building like this, because the building itself, I don't think is on the historic register, but it's it contributes to the district, as I understand. And then you've got the Tennessee Historical Commission in there. So we all love dealing with SHPOs, don't we?
Right. I think the acoustical environment that McLean wanted to create, it was really, there's 3 different acoustical spaces within the building. There's the ballroom, there's the bar, and there's a listening lounge, which is like a high fidelity listening environment. And the challenge was how to create these 3 different acoustical zones. They're all kind of like right next to each other.
Yeah.
And so we considered the ballroom as really being the sound source that's kind of, sporadic in nature, depending on when you have an event. The bar area is really kind of a buffer to the listening lounge. So it kind of helps mask any of the sounds that come from a ballroom event. And then you have the high fidelity listening lounge, which is acoustically isolated. So those are kind of interesting, have those 3 types of acoustical environments within this facility.
All right. So, but McLean, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and talk about the music, because you have this connection with Jim Thompson at Eggleston Works, which is kind of like the premier maker of a beautiful sound equipment thing, and the music was really important, and so was art and photography. I mean, talk about your feeling about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of time, again, looking at the assets in Memphis and just Memphis in general, Bill Street gets a lot of the press for music, and so does Graceland, and for right reasons. But there's so much of Memphis music that's not encompassed in Bill Street and Graceland. So really wanting that to shine and wanting that to be put on display was really important. And getting Jim Thompson at Eggleston Works to get involved, not only from a curation standpoint, he's unbelievably ingrained into the Memphis music scene, but also from the standpoint of his speakers. So we do have one of the kind speakers in the bar space that's playing these records, actually fashioned off an old organ. That's the DJ turntable, and that was something that Jim and his team created for us.
And you've got this incredible stack of vinyl records in there that the designers came up with. I mean, it's enough music that if you listen 12 hours a day, it would take you a century to listen to all of it, or something like that.
It's exceptional, and it's all tied to Memphis. Every record has a Memphis connection, which was really important. So it took us about 16 months to curate all those records. And on the art piece, working with a good friend of mine, an art consultant, Anna Wunderlich, it was important to display a lot of the best of Memphis artists too. And so all the art is one-of-a-kind art. It's handpicked and curated specifically for the spaces in the hotel. And in addition, we engage.
And then I understand you put Jamie Harmon, the photographer, on the train. Let's not forget that this is the train that the city of New Orleans comes through Memphis here. This is kind of one of the central stops here. And you put Jamie on the train to take pictures all along the route to put in the rooms, which is a lovely idea. But Danny and Jonathan, talk about the signage, saving the signage. It's remarkable.
Well, the signage is an important piece of it. There were some existing signs that were part of the original Grand Central Station, if you will. Yeah. And those signs, one was a marquee sign that announced the arrival of trains and the schedule. And then there were a couple of neon signs, one that showed you how to get upstairs to the taxi stand, and another that showed you how to get to the passenger loading area. Those signs were important, so we had to have them carefully removed, and David and his team did a good job of removing those and preserving them, and we had them reworked and then reinstalled carefully. So we think that today, when you go into that space, you get a real genuine feel for what the space used to be. Yeah. And it still provides that connection for you.
Yeah, Jonathan, this is the kind of thing that creates a feeling, and McLean, it's kind of like, this is what gives a sense of being the railroad tradition. All of it kind of ties together. And you feel like you're on the city of New Orleans, and you're making your stop for your lunch or something like that. It's great.
Yeah. And we even fashioned the new porte cochere after. It's kind of a sign in its own way, that it's fashioned in its form. And it's structured to look like the original train platform sheds. They were kind of an inverted V that would shelter passengers as they got on and off the trains.
McLean, I'm going to give you the last word.
Sure.
Hotels are struggling today. How's this going? And is this going to be something that is going to bring folks down to Memphis?
Yeah. So, our family takes a long view of things. And so, we've definitely not been preserved from being impacted by COVID and the pandemic. And it's taken its toll on our hotel, as well as lots of hotels across the globe. But we feel confident in the product. We feel confident in the construction and the design. So when things do come back, it's not a if, but when. When they do come back, we know that it'll be the darling that we all know it can be. It just hadn't had the opportunity to shine quite as much as we know it will.
I think there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand for travel, and looking for interesting places to go, and this is going to be one of them. So, well, congratulations to all of you. Congratulations on winning a bronze award in our 37th annual Reconstruction Awards. Beautiful project. And I'd like to thank McLean Wilson from Cummins Wilson Companies, the developer of the project, Danny Bounds from Bounds and Gillespie, Dave Green from Robbins and Morton, the contractor, and Jonathan Smith from LRK, aka Looney Rick's Kiss, the design architect firm on the project. Thanks to all of you. Great discussion. Well done.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Robert.